Thank you all for coming out to our bird-friendly pantry program. We are very excited that everybody can join us this evening. We are super excited to see you all out here. I know that it's always a little bit challenging to get on Zoom sometimes, but if you do have any questions about Zoom, feel free to ask me privately. There is the chat button in the bottom middle of your screen. We do ask that everybody please keep yourself muted while Ken gives the presentation. That way we can all hear. As you can see here, here's an example that Ken has pulled up about the chat box. Feel free to leave your video recording or video on if you would like to. That way we can see everyone's happy faces, but that is not necessary if you don't want to. We will be recording tonight's presentation as well. So if for some reason you lose connectivity, I know sometimes that happens with the internet, don't worry. We are more than happy to send it back out. And that way everyone has the ability to get that. Tonight's presentation, of course, is going to be given by Ken Elkins. And I guess I can go ahead and introduce you if that works. Sure, absolutely. All right. So Ken is an absolutely avid birder. He has been active in the Christmas bird count since he was a teenager. And then Ken's later participation in the Connecticut and National Envirothons led him to pursue a degree in environmental biology from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. He started his career in conservation education at Westmore Park in West Hartford, Connecticut, and quickly moved on to the Connecticut Audubon Society, where he taught at all 5 of their centers and became their director of education. While at Connecticut Audubon, Ken led many eco-travel trips and organized the World Series of Birding team for 8 years. So Ken is a real expert, and I'm very much so thrilled to have him here giving this talk to people from all across the Eastern Seaboard, from Virginia all the way up to New York and Connecticut. So hello and welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Harrison. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to those who do have your video on. It is nice to see a couple of faces, not just talk to the back wall of my guest room at my house here in Shelton, Connecticut. And I am currently the Community Conservation Manager for Audubon, Connecticut and Audubon, New York, which is partners and part of the sister organization of the Audubon Center Pickering Creek at Pickering Creek that many of you visit and are members of. Tonight, we're going to share about bird-friendly pantries, and this is products for humans that then support lives of birds. So I see many questions already about food for birds, and Harrison and I can address some of those questions at the end as well. But tonight, we're really going to talk about which things we can shop for that are bird-friendly. And that many of them, it's because the agricultural practices are bird-friendly. And of course, since you're here because you like birds, then which of your favorite birds are supported by these different forms of agriculture in other ways that we're getting our food is how we're going to share tonight. I've also set up time partway through for answering some questions. Also, I do have the chat box up in my second screen here, so I can see your questions, and some of them I will try and address as we move along. I will say I have not shared this topic very much. I have learned about each of the programs separately that are supporting bird conservation, but trying to combine them all together, I do hope I keep to my plan of about 40 minutes or less. So hopefully you can all bear with me as I try and make sure we fit with that time tonight. I mentioned I work for Audubon, Connecticut and New York, which we have also at Pickering Creek, they have started to regionalize parts of Audubon's offices, that birds don't see the same boundaries that we have created on a map. And for that reason, we've combined closer offices together. And in Connecticut, we had 3 Audubon centers, the orange dots there, were already close to the New York border, that in the very southwestern part of Connecticut, Audubon Greenwich was the first Audubon education center for National Audubon Society, started in the early 1940s. Audubon Sharon in the northwest corner of the state is the largest baby bird nursery in the state with our wildlife rehabilitation center we have there. And I'm based at the Audubon Center bent to the river, which is the most centrally located of the 3 centers in the state. The black dots are Audubon chapters. So just like you have all the Audubon chapters, which are separate membership organizations, but a dual membership with National Audubon Society, we have 27 chapters in New York State and 5 in Connecticut that are active. And a few of our centers also have extra land near them that we are managing primarily as demonstration sites for forest management, that how we can manage our forests for forest products and also make it better for bird habitat overall. The Audubon bent to the river where I'm based is 700 acres wildlife sanctuary with about 15 miles of trails that are open from sunrise to sunset every day. So if you're ever in the Connecticut area, hopefully you can get to come by and visit our center someday. As you might be familiar with National Audubon, we have 5 conservation priority areas that we, being near the Chesapeake Bay, you're aware of work on coastal water birds and also with salt marsh birds. We also have a water conservation strategy, which is for primarily the western rivers, that there are some birds that we'll describe in a little bit that have a need for a certain amount of water in the rivers at all times. I work in bird-friendly communities where I'm supporting our education centers and other local communities and how they can create more bird-friendly activities in their areas, and we're providing what birds need in the places where humans live. Audubon does work in climate because it is the #1 existential threat to bird populations in the future. And there are a lot of other products that we could talk about and other things you could do some at other times that would be very climate friendly and also be bird friendly. But the strongest connection tonight is working lands, that we have a team of Audubon scientists working on which areas birds need the most and in what areas can we manage those lands that will support bird populations and support how people can thrive as well. And that's where we're going to see a lot of connections tonight. I got the idea for a bird-friendly pantry, actually came up in an article from Living Bird magazine from Cornell Lab of Ornithology about a year ago. And I had many of these products in my house before or tried them out. But it also inspired me to look them up a little bit more because they kept on referring to Audubon programs in many of these areas too. So how are our local birds going to benefit from buying things at our grocery store that may or may not be the most economical or might not be the easiest to find on your shelves sometimes? Well, just for example, when it comes to bird-friendly coffee, the majority of the birds that we call our birds actually spend 6 months, almost 7 months of the year somewhere else. And that somewhere else is in Central or South America or in the Caribbean, and quite often in areas that are perfect for coffee and chocolate production in particular. No matter what part of their life cycle, they need to eat a lot of insects. Yes, they can eat fruits. Yes, they might eat some other seeds and things, but primarily they need insects, and they need a variety of native plants to support those seed and fruit production and for insects. The insects aren't going to be eating on non-native plants. And also we're going to hear that when it comes to organic farming, that the prolific use of synthetic herbicides and pesticides is dramatically reduced the amount of insects available for the birds to eat too. So if we want more scarlet tanagers coming by or Baltimore Orioles visiting your backyard during the spring and summer, we need to think about what we're doing for our choices, because that's supporting that bird's life for those other 6 months of the year and supporting the economies of the areas we want those birds to live in. And without these birds coming back every year, it could start to affect just the overall life cycles of our forests that we call home every day and that we walk in. And just the sound of the birds. That's my favorite part of bird watching, is the sounds. And missing those sounds in the future is what I'm upset about and need to find ways that I can support those birds. So there's a lot of things that you're going to see. And first of all, you might notice on the screen that I use quotes around the word shade grown. And I'm not someone who overly uses air quotes. But first of all, shade grown is one of those labels on a product that is not backed up with any data. And also this requirements to get that label are pretty flimsy. For example, a coffee plantation, traditionally, they would clear the entire land and replant it with those coffee bushes. To then get a shade grown certification, they just need to cover possibly only 15 or 20% of the total farm with tree canopy. And they could do that with banana trees. It doesn't even need to be native plants. So that's why when we see shade grown, birds need that, but that label is not one that we need to look at. A more thoughtful coffee plantation that is bird friendly is going to instead keep the native vegetation and only replace parts of it with coffee bushes. They're going to then need less fertilizers and pesticides to be able to produce those plants. And those plants last a lot longer. They won't have to keep on digging up and replanting them. And that's going to protect our waterways. And it's going to be more economical for the farmers in the long run. So what does it mean to actually find bird-friendly coffee? Well, these plantations do get actual consultations from biologists from the Smithsonian Center for Migratory Birds. And they are looking for a combination of having foliage coverage, that there is shade over those areas, a variation in tree heights, because you also know by visiting local forests that there are birds who love to be high up in the canopy, some that, like an ovenbird, stay low to the ground, and those that like this middle section, maybe 10 to 20, 30 feet up. So we need those different areas of heights of plants as well. That creates an increased biodiversity. And what we have found that in coffee plantations that have become Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center certified, the biodiversity of birds on those plantations is equal to that of nearby native rainforest, especially during the overwintering season. So that means that indigo buntings, Baltimore orioles, wood thrushes, chestnut-sided warblers, they're all now getting proper habitat, or at least keeping that proper habitat that they needed available to them. There are a lot of stickers when you go out there, and finding that Smithsonian bird-friendly habitat, and this is the new logo that they've had for just over a year now, on a bag of coffee is a little bit challenging, especially when you're going out and about in town and you just want to buy a cup of coffee. So there are a few other things to look for, but the Smithsonian is the gold standard. And we have a link in the chat box where you can find what brands you can purchase that have this certification. And some of them are available just to purchase online. For example, I use Birds and Beans Coffee is a brand, birdsandbeans.com. And I actually have it set up as a subscription now. So I always have coffee on my shelves, because that would create even more anxiety this year if I didn't have coffee available on my shelf. The next label that you might look for and notice probably even more often than the Smithsonian is the Rainforest Alliance. And that rainforest frog you can find on coffee and tea and even on some paper products. It has new standards just as this summer that have been upgraded in some ways, and in some other ways we're not sure if it's really as bird friendly as people might expect. They have a very loose native vegetation criteria. It just means that 15 to 20% of that cover needs to be shade plants, and it doesn't, they require it to be native, but I think something that's 20 feet tall counts and not a true canopy tree. There is no requirement for organic farming with the Rainforest Alliance label. Instead, the Rainforest Alliance program has really moved towards the idea of being more inclusive and trying to encourage more farmers and more of the industry to move towards becoming more sustainable overall. So instead, they can purchase that certification with a business plan to say that they will improve over the next 6 years. And it doesn't mean that you're actually getting organically shade-grown coffee today in your grocery basket. One thing that did change, until this year, it was only 30% of the bag, because you can find Dunkin' Donuts coffee, the dark roast blend, does have the Rainforest Alliance sticker on it. And that would mean that 30% of the bag has Rainforest Alliance certified beans in it. Now they have to move towards 90%, but they're giving all those existing products a couple year grace period to make it to that level. But anything new does need to include that. So it's a good thing to look for, but it's nowhere as close as finding the Smithsonian label. Instead, without Rainforest Alliance on there, I would instead try and find something that says organic, because we know that that farm, it's been 3 years with no synthetic herbicides, pesticides, or fertilizers being used on that farm at all. And it is a very strict and regulated label to have. I know a lot of farmers in Connecticut just trying to switch their native plant growing for their nursery. They want just the land that has their native plants on it. They have to wait 2 more years before they can get the certification still. And fair trade means that the farming that is being done is being fair for the humans being involved. So the pricing is more fair, the workers can unionize or have that availability, and it also has some general sustainability requirements as well. Those two are very strict, the organic and the fair trade. There are a lot of other labels you might find out there that are more like Rainforest Alliance, where it's more of a pay to play. And for all of them, if you want a label on your coffee to ensure that what you think you're paying for, those companies, whether it's the farmer or it's the company that is the final producer, they all paid for those certifications, whether it was actually at the end to get the right to the sticker, or that they'd have an audit of their whole farm and they had to pay for that audit to happen. So when we are looking at those, you are going to pay a little bit more. But in the end, we know that we're also supporting farmers that are thinking through their processes more. Then I always get the question, what about Starbucks? They don't follow any of those other programs. They will not tell us which ones are 100% organically grown. Or they do indicate that they are working on fair trade practices, but they don't use the same standards as everybody else. They're just such a big player out there in the market. So what we can see is that they do have some commitments. And if we're out and about in town and we just want to pick up a cup of coffee, we do know that they have changed the cups and the other things around their store more than some of the other places you could buy a cup of coffee. But what's in those beans, their transparency is pretty slim. So we don't really know. We know that they say they're committed to it, but we haven't gotten to see what that really means yet. So I just wanted to point that out because I get that question a lot when I've presented this over the past couple of years. So I tried to look it up again to see if there was anything new. One food product you probably didn't think about that can be extremely bird friendly is maple syrup. The real stuff that comes out of the tree, grown north of Maryland, obviously. But in New York and in Vermont, our conservation partners have worked with maple producers. And when they were originally designing these maple farms over the years, they were cutting out all the small trees. They were cutting out all the shrubs because they wanted every bit of availability of resources to go to their maple trees. But that made it that birds like ovenbirds didn't want to live in that forest any longer. And even birds like red-eyed vireos can thrive in a lot of other unmanaged forests, but things were pruned back and they didn't survive there either. So they have worked on making sure that there's logs available for nesting for ovenbirds and veeries and wood thrushes, and making more diversity of the plant base. And the farmers are actually learning that their maple production is increasing. It's only been a few years, but they've been really excited about this opportunity. So in New York State, we partnered with Cornell University, and we have our first farms that are certified in New York. We're also negotiating our first in Connecticut this year to get this maple certification. And this is this label that you want to look for from Vermont or New Hampshire maple producers. And We did put a link in the chat, has which places in Vermont that you can actually purchase online to get your maple syrup that way as well. We also have our farms at the Audubon Vermont Nature Center, that they have an education center as well. So we can purchase directly from them, and our Audubon Sharon Center has a small maple sugaring operation as well. It was mostly as a school program demonstration, but it's quickly moved into how it can be a great education site for all the maple producers in the area of Southern New York and Connecticut. And then the sales are supporting the rest of our operation at Audubon Sharon. Birds that get to benefit from that, I mentioned the ovenbird before. It gets its name because it builds a little nest that kind of looks like a little oven out of leaves on the forest floor, or sometimes on top of a log right next to the forest floor. And the wood thrushes, one of the most favorite bird songs. You can find them in Maryland as well, but there are even more of them in Pennsylvania and all the way through northern New England that they breed. So the birds are telling us, look for these labels. It's got a scarlet tanager and a maple leaf, and each state has a slightly different label on it. I mentioned dairy as another product we could consider for birds because we can find organically grown dairy products a lot easier than a lot of other things at the grocery store. So it's a great area to make a statement that we do care, that the more that all of us purchase it, the prices will actually come down a little bit when there is more demand, and that they're able to share it more widely. There's also been some research done by Organic Valley, one of the biggest brands, in both Minnesota and in Vermont. And they looked at 50 breeding birds done at different farms, and they've found that birds like the American redstart and Baltimore orioles, and even some of the grassland birds like bobolink and eastern meadowlarks, increased in population in just the 3 years that they did this study. Probably because they were able to produce more young, because there were more insects available when there weren't pesticides being sprayed on those pasture lands. Lucky for us, it's also one product that there's more and more availability. There are more brands, there are more local farms that have switched to organic farming and are sharing that. So we can look for that same USDA organics label on any other product, whether it's coffee or milk, or even in our grains that we buy. At least we know the farmers have made one consideration. If they've made one, there might be more that we just don't know about. So it's a great place to consider. Also, I try and look for more local brands. So for example, yogurt, I've looked out that here in Connecticut, there is a new family Greek yogurt company called Stani that is only available in Connecticut, but from where I live, their family factory, and they deliver just from their own trucks, is 10 miles away. And then it comes to the grocery store 2 miles away from my house, rather than coming from a distribution center in Pennsylvania to my grocery store in Connecticut. And then finally to me, I know that it's a much shorter chain and a whole lot smaller carbon footprint for something as small as my cup of yogurt. One area that our team at Audubon is really happy with, and I've gotten to see this program develop with a good friend that I found from a National Audubon program a few years ago, is our conservation ranching program. And at first, people would say, what do hamburgers and bird conservation have in common? Well, it's that if you heard almost exactly this time last year, there was the report from Smithsonian Cornell of the 3 billion birds lost, that our populations of major groups of birds have all declined over the last 40 years. The group of birds that declined the most by habitat type were grassland birds. They were down actually 70% overall, compared to some of our forest birds were down 20 to 30%. So grassland birds need a lot of help. And we found that, well, most grasslands are privately owned. So how do we reach those who own the areas where these birds like prairie chickens and mountain plovers are breeding? Is that we needed to go to those who own more than 10 acres of it, and ranchers own 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 acres each. And they only care about their cattle. So it took a few years for Auduboners to think this through, but we've come up with a new form of training and then certification of lands that each of these ranches has a true habitat management plan. And that includes how the cattle are foraging and when they're feeding in different areas and how much of that land is designated and how much of it is kept out of foraging each nesting season so that it's better for the birds overall. And the farmers are actually, the ranchers are finding that it's been great for business. Also, there are requirements for the health and welfare of the cattle. They need to be free range and available to graze at any time. They are not grain fed for this Audubon Conservation Ranching Certification Program. And there's also some other environmental sustainability guidelines that we give and coach those ranchers through. In the end, for us buying it, it means that there's no hormones or antibiotics involved. And it came at a right time that more and more consumers, if they are eating beef, want grass-fed. And our program does have quite high standards. The farmers then take it a bit further, and they're thinking through the health of their soil, which then relates to the water that is available for not only their cattle, but also for wildlife around them. And a lot of carbon sequestration actually happens in the soil. So when we are able to leave it in place and they don't have to till it up or touch it at all, it's actually more climate friendly as well. So it's a really smart program on many levels. The more I read about it today, the more that I had another aha moment as I read another article about the work that they've done. And who can't argue with this family troop of burrowing owls, and then the fact that they need help as well. So this program started in the Dakotas with just a couple of ranchers who happened to be friends with a couple of Audubon staff. They thought it'd be a great test pilot. And then Audubon got a sanctuary of its own near Colorado Springs. And we've started that as a demonstration site there. And then of course, there's lots of ranchers in Texas. So we work together, and there are now over 70 ranches that have been Audubon certified. And you can see them all across the West there, including one in California now. And they work with a third-party verifier to certify everything. So it's not just Audubon and the ranchers being involved in this process. And we've also started to work with them on how to bring all of this to market. And for that, some of the first ranchers combined together and they created Blue Nest Beef, which is the largest brand. And they are a group of about 10 or so of those ranches combined that you can purchase online. They also supply some restaurants in the Midwest. And it's the only one online where you can use a subscription service. So it's a competitor to Omaha Steaks, for example. And they are working with Audubon chapters and Audubon centers now that we can get our own codes as recommending Blue Nest Beef. And for every subscription, they will make a contribution directly to that chapter or center for the life of that subscription. So they are economically connected to us and supporting us in both directions. So it's a great program that's out there. And we've put also in the chat box, if you're interested in it, there are many other smaller ranches that have their own websites for purchasing, because some of the packages, Blue Nest, I wanted to buy them as gifts for some of my family, and I don't know if my families have enough space in their freezer. For the packages are kind of large because I have family in the city, so they have small fridges. But I want to think about that idea, and I found two others that I'm going to use instead that I can buy a smaller package. Just so that my family learns by having it right in their own house already that their purchases can affect birds too. Might not have thought about it at first, But the rice we eat can affect birds too. And two programs out there, one of them is in the US. The Rue and Forsman Ranch is just north of Sacramento, California. And they've worked with Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, and a couple of other conservation groups that they were working first on soil conservation and water quality. And then it came about that their practices could also benefit birds. And they have worked out a plan now that they flood their fields along with Audubon recommendations using migration mapping and forecasts so that we know when the birds are about to leave every year. We know roughly which months it's going to be, but we can even predict to the day now. Within the week prior, we can see weather patterns and know when the birds are going to move the most because of the weather. And we can make sure that the stopover sites are available for them. And that's what this rice farm is doing. And they then will harvest, and then the leftovers after the harvesting are a great site because insects move into that. There's shorebirds, there's ibis, there's egrets, all of them are able to work together there. So it becomes additional habitat by creating these wetlands on these farms. We can also find them with the ibis brand is from Cambodia. And there, that group, they offer rice farmers a premium in exchange for a pledge from the farmer that they aren't going to poach and kill their national symbol, the giant ibis. That prior to that, they thought the ibis were always eating their rice, and they learned that no, they weren't. They were actually probably eating all the pests that they didn't want near their rice. And that has become a great program as well. I have not found where to purchase the ibis brand rice yet, but the Rue and Forsman Ranch, we will put a link for that in the chat box in a moment too. So I've shared quite a bit already. If you have any questions, please feel free to add those through. Louise asked about Nespresso. Yes, there are more brands out there than I had time to mention directly about bird-friendly coffee. So if you do have one of those machines, it is one that is more bird-friendly. I also know that while I was looking for birds and beans to make sure that they were going to make it through, and when I'm at the grocery store and in between, or if I'm traveling, I've looked, and Newman's Own brand would be another one that they even have the K-cups, which is another whole story in using K-cups. I would use a reusable cup if I was going to use that method. But you can buy them as beans as well, and they're organic, plus also a lot of their profits go towards grants for other nonprofit organizations afterwards. But yes, good to mention the Nespresso. Thanks for that question. So when you think about bird conservation, you don't typically think about people right out of college. You tend to think of people who have more time that they can get to watch birds, and then they get connected to bird conservation. But what we found is that started with a creative grant for a staff member at Audubon, Arizona, to create a program called Birds and Beers, that he worked with a brewer in Arizona along the Colorado River. And what they did is they would create a feature beer, and then they would do an education program about that featured bird that was on the beer. And they sold out. And they're now on their 5th year, and their events are still even online selling out afterwards, because some people love a new beer. They love the novelty of it. And now we get to make it an educational experience by getting to try out a new beer. So it's a great program that we've taken the success of it from Arizona, and Audubon now has moved the program along to even Florida. And along the way, it's helping birds like the Ridgway's rail, and yellow-billed cuckoo is the key bird that it started with, that this songbird We've got tons of them during when there are caterpillar eruptions here in the Northeast. You probably had them in Maryland this year as well. We had tons of them this year in Connecticut. But out west, that separate area, they live and die by the water levels in the river, because that's how much vegetation is available for them, the insects for them to find. So it's a bird that Audubon's had to work really hard at protecting. Here in the east, though, we have the Delaware River, which supports over 400 different species of birds in the Delaware River watershed, including a lot of the shorebirds when we get to Delaware Bay. And Audubon's worked through those multiple states, and here are the brewers for the Delaware River. They all want clean water. So they want clean water for good beer production, and Audubon and many other groups want clean water for birds and habitat protection. So here are a list of those beers and brewers that are working on programs like this. We put the link in there as well. So if it's one thing that you're interested in, you can know. And a lot of them are local, but you can also find them everywhere. Evil Genius, I even purchased some from Connecticut this past week myself. The most famous of those birds we're trying to help is the red knot, which needs a lot of protection on the Delaware Bay, that the majority of its population migrates through from basically the Chesapeake through New England, but the hotspot is Delaware Bay. It's where that majority of their population stops off every May. So if we're going to talk about beer, what about other drinks? And wine is one that there may someday be a bird-friendly wine label, just like there is bird-friendly coffee. There are some people discussing it. But what we found is that there are many vineyards that are working on it on their own. Some to reduce pesticide use overall. They're adding, either for smaller insects, they're adding bluebird boxes for western bluebirds and swallows to use, or they're also making boxes for things like barn owls to reduce the rodents on their farms. They're also adding more cover crops so that there's more foraging for those birds and others to be near there. And they're also obviously switching to organic practices. So some of them, you can read the label itself. And one vineyard like Erie Vineyards in Oregon, they put their story right on the back and you can read it yourself. Or you can ask at your favorite wine store, and they should help you do this research of which labels they've got there and maybe help you find one as well. If you are looking around and you just like shopping, just be careful. At one point, I loved shopping. It had to have a bird or a dog on the label. That has no indication whether that's going to help the birds or not, though. So instead, though, take a look. And there are a few with birds on them that do support birds. Erie Vineyards, because Erie means hawk nest, or sorry, eagle's nest, essentially. But a few others, I saw that Ravenswood is another brand that vineyard that has some great practices. And there are two labels. One of them is the Lodi rules. That is a region of California. They started with these rules, but their certified green has become a nationwide sustainability and has become the standard for the industry at the moment. And it includes a lot of the things that we would look for, of having woodlands preservation near the vineyard, restoration of buffer zones near waterways, and using cover crops during the off season in particular, so it reduces erosion and adds back some bird habitat for them. The certified sustainable for California also works. And then if you're an Oregon or Washington wine fan, if you found one with the label for being salmon friendly, well, none of that is going to be bad for the birds either. So sometimes we can benefit, the birds can benefit from some other best practices as well. We mentioned before that where we grow coffee, we most also can grow chocolate in very similar conditions. And in particular, this one reserve in, sorry, I'm going to move on to the next slide because my notes are there. From the Dominican Republic is where over half of the world's Bicknell's thrush overwinter. This is a cousin of the wood thrush. It was lumped in with the gray-cheeked thrush, which lives all across the boreal regions of North America. Bicknell's thrush is regionally limited to the Catskill Mountains and the Adirondacks, northern New England, and very southeastern Canada is its entire range. And these birds all overwinter, almost all in the Dominican Republic and the Northern Caribbean. They were able to identify this Reserva zorzal, which is Spanish for thrush. And it was targeted to start this program because it had all the ingredients to help sustain a strong Bicknell's thrush population. And out of that came the dandelion chocolate, or also the hummingbird chocolate, are their two lead brand labels that they've created. I have not found it in stores yet. If you find it down near you, I'd love to hear. But it is great to know that it is there. If you're looking for other chocolates, then take a look, and those same rules that came from birds, use those same things of looking for organic and fair trade would be the first two things that are my bare minimum. If it doesn't have those two things on it, I look for another brand next to it, that there's so many out there and available at the moment. So take a look around and just know that you can make a better choice using those chocolates as well. Some of you heard me talking about coffee before and went, well, what about my tea? And tea is a little bit tougher. That it is grown as a true monoculture and it really doesn't thrive with having any associated crops with it. There are some opportunities for hope, though, of moving along, that it could, that some types of tea are able to be grown as understory plants. And then also they are responding well if we increase the diversity on the edges. So if we created more edge, so make long rectangular tea fields rather than big wide squares, we'd actually increase habitat for the birds by creating more edge. And for that, there are some grown in North America. So then we would in South America, so it'd be mostly our warblers. True migrants would be the birds that would be benefiting the most from it. But also we know that there are birds around the world. So if we ever get to travel again, that it would be nice to know that we would get to see all these endemics when we travel and know that they're living on farms or near farms that are managed quite well. So by us taking small steps of making purchases where we can, it will snowball. And we're already seeing that buying local is becoming more and more important. So going to your farmer's market for vegetables during the spring and summer, and whatever you can still purchase from them this time of year, whether it's their own produced products or some of their cold storage things, vegetables, that's great for keeping down our carbon footprint, keeping our neighbors in business, and overall, it's gonna support birds as well. And the more that not only you and I make those choices, but our neighbors make them, that then it become a better business model for more to participate as well. And that industry can grow and it will help birds throughout their life cycle. So thank you all for listening this afternoon. I can certainly take some questions, and I include this cartoon. I'm sorry that the credits fell off. It's from an online cartoon called False Knees. And they do a lot of bird-related comics, but if my coworkers from the Audubon Center Bend to the River were on with me tonight, they could attest that this is exactly what it's like to have a conversation with me, is that I will stop mid-sentence and I have to stop because I heard a Blackburnian warbler that nobody else heard, or something like that. So I see we do have a couple of questions. Great. Jody says, you mentioned owls keeping pests away. Last summer, I had to take down all my bird feeders because we had an outdoor rat problem. Do you have any suggestions so I can keep feeding birds and keep the rats away? We've had the same problem at our Audubon Center at times too. And rats, there's always more than you expect if they're actually there, is a bigger challenge. Depending on your location, screech owl boxes can sometimes be successful. They're quite often used more for winter roosting than they are for breeding, but they always need more cavities because they get outcompeted by squirrels all the time. So yes, whether it was Maryland or Connecticut, in Stratford, I do know you have screech owls in Stratford, especially in the north side of town. There are, I know multiple parks that I could find screech owls tonight even probably. So they do love suburbia, which is what your town is mostly. So if you have enough trees around, you could put up screech owl boxes. And for that, I would go to Wild Birds Unlimited in Fairfield if that's where you live, and they have owl boxes to purchase as well. So, and I did have one person that they had owls one year, then they went away, and then she had a mouse problem in her basement. And then a week later in the fall, it was between Halloween and Thanksgiving, the owl showed up in the box, and within a week, there was no more mouse problem in the basement again. So maybe it can work for you. I think we're a small enough group. If anybody else wants to unmute to ask their question, I do that. Or Harrison, do you want to read the next one while I take a sip of water?
Absolutely. So Alan Brown asks, are there some producing countries or regions of the world where claims on products of environmentally friendly are more reliable than usual? So asking, I guess, about the validity of some of the claims.
I don't think it's one country over another, because if you're looking at actual labels on the claims of the products, those are now like USDA organic and the bird friendly ones that we saw in fair trade. Those are all international nonprofits that are doing the auditing of those. So they're third parties altogether. So if they are getting that label, it's not because somebody really got paid off for it. But as you heard, some of them are like the USDA organic and the Smithsonian's labels. Those have strict requirements, and it's yes or no. You pass or you fail to receive that certification. Others, it's a spectrum. And then from that, you could go and see transparency on Rainforest Alliance's website. You could see where they fit on that realm of where they are in the certification of Rainforest Alliance. I think that would probably be that. And if you wanted to, on that bird friendly coffee link that was above in the chat box, go to that page, and on the right side, there's all the other similar articles. And there is one that goes into detail about each of those labels that I kind of summarized for you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I like to support our local roaster, and they do provide certified USDA organic and fair trade coffee. And I've asked them about bird-friendly coffee, and they weren't that familiar with it. But I'm just curious, how much more of a lift is it for someone that already has certified organic fair trade to move to the bird-friendly coffee?
So that roaster is getting beans from multiple farms, and it's that each farm is what gets certified with the bird friendly certification. So they could look and see who else is getting certified and add them as an option rather than changing up everything that they purchase and add. So they could have just one blend that would be exactly bird friendly, because we have that in Connecticut, that there is a company that supplies one of our biggest grocery store chains in like all the college campus area, their dining services, And they have, most of them are organic, and then they have a few of their blends that are bird friendly. And that link that's there on the page is where to buy, but that is embedded in the full page where all that certification is involved. But to go beyond the organic and fair trade, it's that they need to have a significant amount, at least 40% shade cover. And there is, I believe now, a native plant requirement to that for the bird-friendly certification.
Okay. Do you, can I ask a follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I've been trying to figure out is how I can go back to them and suggest something. Is there a way of buying like a certain wholesale amount? For example, if I got enough members of the birding community that were willing to buy from them, I guess I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for them. So if we can say, here is a supplier, if you buy 100 pounds of beans or 500 pounds or whatever from this area, I'm sure that you could sell them to like members of our bird club or other people. But is there like a supplier for someone like me to find where we could point them in that direction to make something like that happen?
Just a sec here. I'm trying to get back to that website myself, and there's another page within it that is about, I think there is a link within it that is specifically for people who want to, they can see who the importers are, and then they can buy wholesale from those importers.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a couple links there in terms of specific farms and importers. So I'm assuming you're talking about Rise Up Coffee.
Right.
So yeah, so if we wanted to, then having that list and being able to talk to them about, you know, these particular brands or this particular farm, and you know, being able to do that kind of lift, at least in the beginning for them, I think would probably be advisable. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is one of those things where I think we can give them a good amount of information.
Okay.
And then it's just kind of up to them to take it from there.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Another question from Alan. Are there any source areas for bananas that the growing practices are not habitat destructive, or is the problem universal for bananas?
I'll start by saying I don't know much about bananas overall. I do know that the one other option is to buy organic, and to actually have that organic label means that land is not spraying. But there is a lot of other soil erosion and how they use the land overall, and the fact that it's a monoculture are all things that do make it difficult for birds overall. So I guess it's the next area I need to research about this. And the only thing I can say is that, yes, at least choose organic with that. Interesting one. And I don't know if there's another region that would be better than not. I know I trust Costa Rica overall better than some other nations for their choices they made for sustainability, but I don't know if that directly goes to all of their producers or not.
Excellent question. I hadn't considered the bananas. Another question from Jody. My husband buys large quantities of raw beans from Sweet Marie's and roasts the beans here at home. Does buying raw ever make a difference regarding birds?
I don't know. There's still the issue of beans are flying all over the country. So the carbon footprint of our coffee is something we'll have to address someday. But otherwise, it's the source of those beans and how each small family farm or larger farm is growing those beans is what directly impacts birds the most. So whether you can find out whether they're at least organic, and then it's Yeah, country by country, it varies a lot. So I couldn't even tell you that one country is better than another for that. But it's that you, if they can't find out if there's anything about those raw beans, the story behind them would be helpful.
So I'm actually going to go ahead and put a link down in the box, the chat box, that has a list of good, potentially good gifts for birders for the winter holidays. You could definitely find some bird-friendly ideas in there. I am purchasing some bird-friendly coffee for some family members who I will not be able to visit this year. I do really think it, everyone likes coffee or sometimes tea. There's lots of gifts that we can choose to make. And again, many of these things are purchasable online, and you can get them delivered to other people's houses. And make sure, of course, that if possible, try to have them delivered in a bigger group of things. So that way it's, less of a carbon footprint there. But they are good gifts. And again, the more we kind of vote with our dollars, so to speak, then the better it is. So supporting these business practices makes it better for the future for all these businesses and ranches and farms and things moving forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday season and enjoy the birds around you. Hopefully you can get out and sure.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jody. I'm the one next door in Stratford.
Oh, yeah.
So I just happened yesterday. It's wild that I'm seeing you all here now because I was standing at our door yesterday and a bird came right to the door that I've never seen before. Bird feeders down and all. And I thought maybe you might know. It was small, like the size of a sparrow. And it was like a reddish brown feathers. It was kind of puffed up, but I'm guessing because it was cold. But it had a blue stripe across the top of its eye. I was wondering.
The blue sounds odd. I can't think of many, and I'm trying to think of instead if it was, I did actually get photos of another bird in Connecticut after the heavy rain on Monday, and its face was more blue than black. And my guess is that it ended up being a house sparrow that we could see other field marks on it, is that it was playing in a puddle that had some sort of liquid in it that it got stained. And so the reddish brown overall and puffy, I was imagining fox sparrow. So if everything else on it, if you looked up fox sparrow, matches except for the line by the eye is bluish, then it's just, it tried to preen in the wrong puddle. And you've got that blue color there, but the reddish brown overall is making me think fox sparrow first.
Yeah, I was not used to seeing that color. It was gorgeous. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. So it looks like we're kind of nearing the end of our time here. I will go ahead and point out, I will add even more links into the chat box, and I will add some follow-up emails tomorrow with all of the links available for everybody. But this is a link to the events for Bent of the River. So they have an owl program coming up on December 8th, I believe, and that will be online. So if you would like to attend that, you can go ahead and find more information there. And then the following link is one for programs at Pickering Creek. And we have a number of programs. Tomorrow we have a kids craft along where we'll be making some nature wreaths. So if you have any kids or grandkids who might want to attend, that's going to be online. And then next Thursday, we will have a poetry program called World of Words and Wonder. We will be sitting kind of like a nice little fireside chat, talking about some of our favorite poetry and sharing some of that as well. So if any of those events interest you, I would encourage you to look up the Bent of the River events webpage with the link below, or the Pickering Creek events page, and register and attend those. And you'll get a lot of excellent and fun times, I think.
Thank you, Harrison. I'm glad we made the arrangements to make this work. And you'll see on the Bent of the River events for January that Harrison will be doing a talk for our audience of Bent of the River. and that those of you who followed me from Bend to the River to Pickering Creek tonight, that you will follow up and watch Harrison and his colleagues for events in the future too. So thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Absolutely.
I'll stick around for a question or two still.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. It was very great. Very good.
Great program.
Thanks.
Hey, Kimmy,
Hi, Cheryl.
how are you?
Okay,
didn't-
you.
Didn't know you were here.
I learned so much.
Yeah, so did I. It was really fun. Very interesting.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care.
Great.
All right. Awesome. Well said. Thank you so much. It was awesome. It certainly learned a lot. And yeah, I didn't realize that there was, you know, bird friendly rice and stuff like that. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah. So there are just a few photos without photo credits, but I think it's shareable enough, is that I'll send you my box folder on this. And I'm still trying to figure out what to do about this, because if I shared my entire PowerPoint folder with you, you'd be like a kid in a candy store. Is that problem is that not all of them have like all the photo credits. They all have the Audubon branding, like I'm a stickler for compared to coworkers. I have a couple of them I haven't done in like 4 years, so those are behind. But yes, so you saw my entire list, so I have all of those and then a lot more that I've done some specialty ones as well. Or I've also, every year I make my list a little bit different, because I've been doing for 5 years, I've been doing senior centers where I just go and do like once a month. I'm their second Tuesday or their second Friday of the month, right after lunch talk.
Oh, yeah.
So those places, there are a couple I can do every year, but they're always looking for something new. So I've just created a lot.
Yeah, as I say, we certainly, especially recently, we have a bit of a backlog. We have quite a few presentations and we're adding more. We're doing a lot of programs recently.
Yep. So I at least have the guts ready for you. You know, I've the basics of something created as well. So if you ever have something and you go, I wonder if somebody's already started to create this. It's not a conversation that goes on in Slack often enough.
Yeah.
In my opinion, is that, you know, we should not consider it plagiarism. We're all Audubon. It's one paycheck, you know. So
Yeah, I agree with that
yeah,
wholeheartedly.
I'll send you a link to that.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking forward to giving the talk in January. It should be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'll try to keep it to an hour.
You know, but most of it, if it's my birding group, my Wednesdays, I was doing almost 90 minutes and I did 4 weeks semesters, like 4-week series of like birding by ear or shorebird ID would be 4. And then I'd end up shortening them. Was fall warblers was 3 weeks and hawks was 3 weeks. But yeah, 3 weeks was the bare minimum of that.
Okay. As I will say that the one thing I do have in some of my presentations are little, especially because we do over Zoom and you can set up kind of quiz questions. So I do have a couple quiz questions for the audience to participate. So they're not stumpers or anything like that, but you know, just trying
making it even slightly interactive. Exactly. Yeah, they like that. And also gives you a chance to catch your breath and grab a quick sip, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the main reasons why I have them, is that I can actually get a little bit of water in me.
So do you do this where you usually have a second person with you, or do you do everything solo?
We do. The way we kind of have it is we have the presenter and the host. So that way the host kind of is able to take care of all the questions and any technical difficulties, especially in the beginning. We had a lot of technical difficulties with people signing on and stuff. So, you know, we usually kind of have at least 2 people, occasionally 3 people. If there's, you know, over 100 people, then we have to have 3 or 4 people just in case. But yeah, those big programs are real pain in the tuchus sometimes.
Can I ask what else did you do that got you over 100 people?
We had a talk by an author. I can't remember his name right now. From Colorado. We had about, I think, 200 people. I can send you his contact information. I think he's done other Audubon talks as well. And he has done the North American Birding by Ear books.
Oh, yeah, you had Nate Pilo.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I was
Pipelo. Yeah, Pipelo.
Yep, I was blanking on the name. All I could think of was Doug Talmy, who's another professor.
It's within reach at all moments.
So yeah, he was great. He was really fantastic.
Mhm.
And all of our birding club members from basically across Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania and stuff came out for it. So if you want his contact information or anything like that, I'm more than happy to share it with you. And
I saw that one of the Texas centers used him as well for
Yeah.
a talk. Cool. I have, for like that level of presentation, I end up with competition is our Connecticut Ornithological Association is pretty big and powerful in the state. While it's all volunteer run, that's where all the major bird watchers participate. So they do a couple a year as well. And they're like one of the few people who can get David Sibley in for free because he grew up here.
Oh yeah. I say I will. I do say that I have a slight connection with David Sibley. I got my master's with Dr. Lanham down at Clemson University. He's done some work with Sibley, but I haven't gotten a chance to meet the man yet. But yes, Lanham of course is great too. But he's so busy these days that it's just like impossible to nail down.
He had something online with Sibley last night or Tuesday night, right?
Yes, he was moderating a conversation with them. Yeah, so he's great, and yeah, I think I can't remember who else was in that presentation.